Below the endless blue of the Pacific, a shadowed land may have once risen, its peaks piercing clouds and tides curling around unknown shores. Imagine continents shifting, oceans reshaped, and storms rewritten by the presence of a landmass lost to memory and myth. Here, in a world that might have been, life evolved in isolation, building cities, cultures, and knowledge unknown to human history. Volcanoes smoked over coral cities, winds carried the songs of a hidden people, and stars guided their every movement. Join us as we journey into the imagined heart of Mu, exploring a civilization that could have changed the world, the continent that could have rewritten the Pacific. Imagining Mu rising from the Pacific requires more than picturing an island emerging from blue water. It demands reimagining the entire choreography of air, heat, and ocean that defines the world's largest basin. Because the sudden presence of a landmass stretching perhaps 4,000 kilometers across the tropics would distort prevailing wind belts, fracture the open water pathways of atmospheric moisture, and redirect the powerful gyres that currently circulate uninterrupted from Japan to the Americas. In this scenario, the easterly trade winds, normally steady and predictable, would collide against Mu's volcanic highlands, rising in massive orographic waves that generate towering cumulonimbus systems capable of producing rainfall totals exceeding 6,000 millimeters per year along the continent's eastern slopes. Numbers comparable to present-day Cherrapunji, but scaled across a coastline long enough to reshape global precipitation patterns. The Pacific High, a dominant pressure system that influences storms across half the globe, would be forced southward or split entirely, altering monsoon intensities in East Asia, weakening rainfall in the Pacific Northwest of North America, and redirecting typhoon pathways that previously swept uninterrupted across warm water. Imagining its western face reveals yet another atmospheric reconfiguration, because the rain shadow deserts forming on Mu's lee side would stretch for hundreds of kilometers, fed by sinking, superheated air masses similar to the processes that created the Atacama Desert, yet intensified by the continent's immense scale. These hyper-arid plains would experience annual rainfall below 20 millimeters, allowing salt-crusted playas to form and giving rise to silica-rich dust that storms could loft high enough to reach the upper troposphere, where winds might disperse it thousands of kilometers westward toward Australia. Such dust, loaded with trace minerals like iron and calcium, would seed the surrounding ocean waters, stimulating episodic phytoplankton blooms detectable from imagined satellites as turquoise swirls expanding across entire gulfs carved between Mu's promontories. Marine chemists studying this hypothetical world would calculate that each major dust event could increase chlorophyll concentrations by up to 30%, temporarily fueling food webs that depend on the delicate balance between nutrients and sunlight in these oligotrophic waters. As the continental mass disrupted the ocean itself, the Pacific's great conveyor systems would be forced into new geometries, because the North Pacific Gyre, currently an enormous clockwise system tens of thousands of kilometers wide, would break into separate rotational basins divided by Mu's jutting peninsulas, each with its own distinct thermocline depth and salinity gradient. The Kuroshio Current, one of the fastest western boundary currents on Earth, would slam into Mu's northern headlands instead of sweeping eastward toward Hawaii, generating swirling eddies capable of mixing deep, nutrient-rich waters into the sunlit surface layers. This upwelling would create a region of extraordinary marine productivity on Mu's northeastern shelf, with potential annual primary production rates rivaling those of the modern Benguela system, exceeding 300 grams of carbon per square meter, and supporting immense populations of imagined filter-feeding megafauna adapted to this altered seascape. Meanwhile, on the southern margin, the equatorial countercurrents would pool warm water along Mu's coasts, raising sea surface temperatures to 30 degrees Celsius or more, and powering hyper-intense tropical cyclones that would dwarf many storms of our present world. Cyclones whose energy budgets exceed 10-15 joules, and whose eye walls would tower over Mu's coastal forests like living walls of vapor. Envisioning its geology adds another layer to this reshaped world, because a hypothetical continent in the heart of the Pacific would require a route of low density, buoyant crust rising above the surrounding basaltic seafloor, implying a complex assembly of microplates, mantle plumes, and ancient fragments of continental lithosphere, long thought impossible in today's tectonic configuration. If such a landmass existed, it could host volcanic provinces rivaling the Deccan Traps, with basaltic flows fanning out in sheets tens of meters thick, each layer rich with radiogenic isotopes, especially 40R, 39R signatures, marking eruptions that occurred over millions of years. These lava fields might support unique minerals formed under the continent's particular pressure-temperature regime, including hydrated peridotites altered by serpentinization as seawater infiltrates deep faults. Over time, these geological forces could create mountain ranges comparable to the Southern Alps of New Zealand, with peaks rising above 4,000 meters and capped with alpine glaciers that carve valleys into spirals of moraine and kettle lakes, each reflecting atmospheric conditions modified by Mu's presence. Imagining Mu's coastlines reveals an entirely new suite of ecosystems, because its continental shelves would host seagrass meadows and mangrove systems adapted to currents and temperatures reorganized by the continent's bulk. Extensive tidal flats, stretching hundreds of kilometers in regions where the gravitational interplay of Earth and Moon interacts with Mu's continental mass, would accumulate biogenic carbon at rates far exceeding modern estuaries, potentially storing 100-200 megagrams of carbon per hectare each year. These sediments would preserve the remains of mollusks, crustaceans, and reef organisms whose morphology is shaped by the altered water chemistry of Mu's marginal seas, where the buffering capacity of dissolved bicarbonate might vary significantly from basin to basin. Coral systems forming along Mu's southern arc would likely evolve tolerance to hotter, more fluctuating temperatures, with hypothetical species developing symbiotic algae capable of higher thermal thresholds, perhaps 2-3 degrees Celsius above modern bleaching limits, supported by unique genetic pathways, similar to heat-resistant clades observed in the northern Red Sea. As the continent expands inland, rivers born from its monsoonal rainfall carve networks of valleys rich with nutrients, weathered from Mu's basaltic bedrock, producing soils high in phosphorus and potassium that could support vast forests unlike any found across the Pacific today. Imagine towering conifers analogous to Araucaria species mixed with broadleaf angiosperms that evolve under intense wind patterns shaped by the continent's mass, developing flexible trunks and spiral leaf arrangements to reduce drag during seasonal typhoon strikes. These imagined ecosystems could host flightless birds adapted to dense undergrowth, marsupial analogues evolving convergently in isolation, and insect species whose bioluminescent patterns reflect the specific wavelengths of Mu's dense, moisture-laden twilight. Paleobotanists exploring this world would find pollen fossils with distinctive tricolpate structures, marking evolutionary divergences triggered by the demands of Mu's climate gradients, stretching from equatorial rainforest to cold, alpine tundra. And as we step back from this imagined world, we see how Mu's presence reshapes not only geography and climate, but also the potential living tapestry, draped across its peaks, valleys, and shores, allowing us to envision an evolutionary stage set entirely apart from the Pacific we know today. By contemplating how winds shift, how currents bend, how landforms rise, and how life continually adapts to the spaces it inherits, we prepare ourselves to consider the next question. If a continent like Mu truly existed, what thriving, extraordinary beings might have emerged upon its soil? Ecosystems born from an impossible continent. Across Mu's reshaped landscapes, life begins to answer the continent's call, with forms moulded entirely by isolation, creating a biological frontier unlike anything that ever existed on our Earth. In this imagined world, the moment Mu rose from the Pacific floor, its vast plateaus, inland seas, and monsoon-washed forests became evolutionary laboratories, sealed off from every familiar lineage of the surrounding continents. Island biogeography, normally applied to archipelagos, would scale upward into an entire continental expanse, meaning the first pioneers, microbes, spores, drifting seeds, or wind-borne insects would radiate into empty ecological roles, with a speed and creativity driven by genetic drift and founder effects. This isolated stage would allow ecosystems to bloom with combinations of traits and anatomical experiments that would challenge any expectation biologists ever formed from the Pacific Rim. Along the flooded mangrove deltas, amphibious herbivores evolve elongated limbs and salt-filtering palates to survive the continent's tidal extremes, giving rise to creatures shaped by both land and sea. With Mu positioned across the heart of the Pacific Gyres, its coastlines would be sculpted by immense tidal fluctuations that could exceed 4 meters in certain regions, producing brackish ecosystems rich in mineral sediments. Here, herbivorous tetrapods might develop keratinized filtration combs capable of extracting freshwater gradients from saline pools, a trait loosely inspired by the salt-excreting glands of marine iguanas, but far more specialized. Their limbs, stretched by generations of selective pressure, would resemble the multi-jointed stilts of wading birds while maintaining the sturdy musculature of mammals, enabling them to graze on algae mats and tidal grasses in rhythms controlled by the moon. Farther inland, dense canopies shelter arboreal predators whose rotating wrist bones and flexible vertebrae echo evolutionary solutions unseen in the rest of the Pacific Rim. In these closed forests, where humidity would reach 90% during Mu's equatorial monsoon season, foliage would form layered microhabitats suited for silent climbers. These predators might belong to a lineage that diverged from early insectivorous mammals brought by cyclonic storms, evolving into vertebrates with near prehensile forelimbs and vertebral columns capable of torsion angles exceeding those of any modern felid. Their hunting strategies would rely on silent leaps across branches coated with epiphytic mosses nourished by Mu's mineral-rich air, and their sensory organs might include slit-pupilled eyes adapted to the continent's frequent cloud shadows. On Mu's high volcanic ridges, thin air and intense ultraviolet radiation drive the rise of feather-scaled gliders built for soaring between thermal columns. These basaltic heights, some exceeding 6,000 meters, would generate katabatic winds that sweep downwards each night, allowing winged creatures to evolve membranes reinforced by keratinized filaments rather than classic avian feathers. Their feather scales, blending reptilian durability with aerodynamic precision, would be coated in melanin-rich pigments that protect tissues from high-altitude UV exposure, similar to how the skin of Andean birds incorporates eumelanin. Over thousands of generations, they might even evolve spiraling descent patterns that exploit the continent's frequent volcanic updrafts, gliding from ridge to ridge as if carried by invisible rivers of air. Within the continent's subterranean lava tubes, blindness becomes an evolutionary advantage as pale invertebrates navigate by echo-sensitive antennae. These systems, dozens of kilometers long, carved by ancient basalt flows, would host entire ecosystems separated from the sunlight world above. In this what-if realm, an isolated lineage of crustaceans could modify their exoskeletons into porous structures capable of amplifying low-frequency vibrations, allowing them to detect mineral drips or the movement of distant predators. Their metabolism would rely on chemoautotrophic bacteria feeding on hydrogen sulfide emissions near geothermal vents, creating a closed nutrient loop entirely disconnected from photosynthesis, mirroring real-world extremophiles found in deep-sea hydrothermal systems. Sweeping the central savannas, grazing megafauna feed on mineral-rich grasses sustained by Mu's phosphorus-laden soils. Unlike the volcanic soils of Hawaii or the nutrient-poor deserts of Australia, Mu's imagined foundation includes uplifted seafloor sediments rich in phosphate nodules, providing a fertile base for C4 grasses capable of rapid growth. These grasses, reinforced with high silica concentrations similar to the African savanna's toughest species, would shape the morphology of herbivores forced to develop enamel plates across their molars. Over time, large-bodied mammals, some exceeding the mass of the extinct Paraceratherium, might evolve multi-chambered stomachs, optimized for breaking down silica blades, forming herds that migrate with the pulses of seasonal monsoon rains. Toward the polar-facing slopes, cold-adapted browsers develop insulating down over armored plates, merging mammalian and reptilian strategies into a singular lineage. This blending of traits would emerge from Mu's dramatic elevation gradients, where cold air descends rapidly during winter months, producing frost-prone regions despite the continent's equatorial belt. Evolution might favor creatures with dermal armor akin to ankylosaurs, but covered in fibrous protofeathers for thermal regulation, allowing them to withstand temperature swings of up to 30 degrees Celsius in a single day. Their nasal turbinates would enlarge over generations, permitting heat conservation comparable to Arctic mammals, while maintaining the durability needed to forage among thorn shrubs that flourish in these cooler microclimates. Deep in the freshwater marshlands, amphibians expand their respiratory surfaces into frilled membranes that flutter like living gills. These wetlands, fed by monsoonal floods and volcanic aquifers, would contain waters heavy in dissolved minerals such as iron and manganese, influencing the pigmentation and oxygen-carrying capacities of local species. Amphibians dwelling here might evolve external frills, reminiscent of axolotl gills, but far more intricate, forming ribbon-like membranes capable of extracting oxygen even from stagnant pools. Their life cycles could shift to include extended juvenile phases, enabling them to exploit both aquatic and terrestrial niches, while maintaining metabolic flexibility, ideal for unpredictable hydrological cycles. In the shadowed understories, bioluminescent pollinators emerge as agents of night-blooming flora that rely on spectral cues invisible to human eyes. This simulated coevolution would stem from the continent's unusual abundance of nocturnal environments created by towering canopies and near-constant atmospheric haze. Plants might develop chlorophyll variants that fluoresce under bioluminescent wavelengths, inviting pollinators that emit soft pulses of blue-green light derived from luciferin analogues. Such pollinators would not merely navigate the darkness, they would sculpt the rhythm of Mu's botanical life, linking light production to nutrient availability and nocturnal humidity cycles. Throughout Mu's diverse landscapes, from watery deltas to dark understories, evolution unfolds in ways unseen anywhere else on Earth. Each biome, whether roaring with megafauna, humming with gliders, or flickering with bioluminescent interactions, tells a story of adaptation shaped by geography, climate, and time. Standing within this hypothetical wilderness, one can almost sense the potential for discovery, the exhilaration of encountering species and ecosystems that defy expectation. It is here, amid these imagined wonders, that we begin to wonder how the first humans might set foot upon Mu, confronted by its untamed richness and astonishing diversity, opening the doorway to the next chapter of exploration. The first human footsteps on Mu. From the edge of Mu's mangrove-laden shores, the first humans could have glimpsed a land both perilous and breathtaking, stretching far beyond any horizon they had known. Salt-laden winds carried scents of unfamiliar flora, while distant mountain ridges rose like jagged sentinels from dense forests. Rafts or simple dugout canoes might have been the earliest vessels, navigating shallow channels and hidden tidal creeks, bringing humans into a realm where every step demanded careful attention. The sheer scale of Mu dwarfed all prior journeys, offering abundant resources, yet threatening those unprepared for the rhythms of monsoonal rains and tidal extremes. Navigating the tidal deltas demanded ingenuity, as shifting sandbars and hidden channels tested every skill honed across distant continents. Early settlers would have needed to read the patterns of the water, noticing subtle changes in wave reflection against mangrove roots or the way sediment-laden water pooled in eddies. Such observations could give rise to precise local knowledge of tides, storm surges, and safe passage through channels teeming with brackish fish or aquatic megafauna. The ability to anticipate the environment's moods would have been critical, combining both instinctual awareness and learned expertise passed down through generations. Inland rivers carved through mineral-rich soils, offering both life-giving water and treacherous currents that reshaped human travel daily. Canoes and simple rafts allowed humans to move upstream, following the twists of waters enriched by Mu's volcanic terrain. Along these banks, fertile silt supported the growth of edible plants unknown elsewhere, while the rivers themselves hosted unique fish and crustacean species that provided reliable protein. Knowledge of seasonal flooding cycles would dictate settlement locations, timing of migrations, and the cultivation of small gardens adapted to Mu's unusually fertile yet unstable soils. Dense forests concealed predators and resources alike, forcing early settlers to develop new tracking, foraging, and defensive strategies. Here, humans might have relied on sharp observation and early tools to navigate an ecosystem filled with flightless predators, arboreal hunters, and insects evolved in isolation. Fire could have been used not only for warmth or cooking, but as a deterrent against nocturnal species adapted to Mu's humid darkness. The forest floor, thick with fallen fronds and epiphytic mosses, became both a highway for prey and a hidden trap, demanding careful step and acute awareness, heightening the senses of those who dared to venture deep within. High volcanic ridges provided both vantage points and hazards, where thin air and unstable slopes required cautious exploration. From these peaks, early humans could survey surrounding valleys, rivers, and coastlines, planning, hunting, and gathering excursions with unparalleled perspective. However, the same volcanic terrain brought rock slides, fissures, and unpredictable geysers of steam, demanding adaptive climbing techniques and tools suited for both survival and reconnaissance. In these elevated zones, humans would also confront new challenges of oxygen scarcity, colder temperatures, and unshielded UV radiation, prompting innovations in clothing, shelter, and cooperative survival strategies. Along the coastal reefs, humans might have devised novel fishing techniques, harnessing tidal patterns and local species unknown to any other culture. Nets woven from fibrous plants, spears carved from volcanic stone, and traps constructed in tidal pools could yield abundant fish, mollusks, and crustaceans. Observing Mu's altered ocean currents would provide insights into the migration patterns of reef-dwelling fish and the timing of plankton blooms, critical for seasonal planning. These practices would not only sustain early populations, but also establish a rhythm of life intimately attuned to Mu's unique marine ecology. Seasonal storms drove migrations inland, compelling settlements to form near fertile valleys and sheltered plains. The monsoon-fed valleys protected from cyclones while offering rich soils for early horticulture and freshwater sources. Temporary encampments could evolve into semi-permanent villages, constructed from local timber, woven mats, and mud, strategically placed to maximize sunlight, shelter, and proximity to rivers. These adaptive settlements reflect an understanding of the landscape's energy, integrating both defensive needs and ecological opportunities into daily life. Communities likely adapted architecture to reflect the rhythms of winds, rainfall, and ocean tides, blending survival with emergent aesthetic sensibilities. Elevated homes, ventilated dwellings, and structures oriented to seasonal sun angles would be early experiments in harmonizing human habitation with environmental pressures. Ceremonial spaces might have emerged in natural clearings or atop ridges, where visual alignment with sunrises, moon phases, or ocean horizons underscored the interconnection of culture and landscape. The very layout of these settlements hints at an innate understanding of sustainable cohabitation, foreshadowing urban planning shaped by both necessity and observation. Language, storytelling, and ritual may have evolved to encode environmental knowledge, preserving strategies for navigation, hunting, and farming. Oral traditions could carry warnings about dangerous tides, descriptions of predator behaviors, or precise timing for planting and harvesting. Songs, chants, and visual symbols would act as both educational tools and cultural anchors, allowing early humans to thrive in isolation while passing wisdom to successive generations. In this way, Mu becomes not only a cradle of life for flora and fauna, but also a catalyst for human cognitive and social complexity. By shaping their surroundings and learning from Mu's vast landscapes, these first humans laid the foundations for settlements attuned to the land's unique rhythms, hinting at civilizations yet to rise. The forests, rivers, and volcanic ridges that once shaped species, evolution now direct human innovation, forging patterns of cooperation, adaptation, and cultural expression. As they discovered which resources could be harvested, which terrains offered refuge, and which challenges demanded ingenuity, these pioneers were not merely surviving, they were beginning to imagine a world they could inhabit fully. Their footsteps, tentative yet resolute, trace the opening chapter of human interaction with a continent whose size, isolation, and abundance promised civilizations as extraordinary as the land itself, setting the stage for settlements that would eventually grow into cities imagined around the rhythms of sea, stone, and sky. If Mu built cities of coral and fire perched atop basalt terraces, the first Mu cities emerged like molten dreams crystallized in stone, coral, and glass. The rising structures caught the early morning light, casting long shadows across tidal plains and verdant valleys, signaling to all who approached that humans had begun to impose order upon the continent's raw chaos. Every city seemed to emerge organically from its landscape, the volcanic ridges, coral reefs, and shifting tides dictating the orientation of streets, plazas, and monumental platforms. In this imagined Mu, architecture was not merely shelter, it became a tactile dialogue between humans and the elemental forces surrounding them. Streets carved from volcanic rock twisted through plazas adorned with luminescent coral mosaics, reflecting sunlight and the shimmering tide. The streets followed gentle gradients designed to channel rainwater without flooding communal spaces, while coral tiles, polished by repeated foot traffic and tidal spray, lent a glowing vibrancy to public spaces. These mosaics might have encoded symbolic patterns, marking seasonal cycles, trade routes, or celestial alignments, demonstrating a culture attuned to both terrestrial and cosmic rhythms. For early settlers, moving through these streets would have felt like navigating both a city and a living map, where knowledge of the land and its patterns was etched into the very stones beneath their feet. Walls of dense basalt, interspersed with translucent volcanic glass, allowed interiors to glow with diffused natural light, creating spaces both functional and otherworldly. Houses, workshops, and temples incorporated these materials in ways that balanced insulation, durability, and aesthetics. The volcanic glass, perhaps polished and set in lattices, captured sunlight to illuminate interiors while reflecting shimmering patterns that shifted with the day's passage. Such design choices suggest not only an understanding of material properties, but also an intuitive grasp of optics and atmospheric effects, allowing buildings to interact visually with the ever-changing Mu skies. Bridges and aqueducts channeled rainwater and tidal surges, demonstrating early urban engineering tailored to Mu's volatile climate. Flooding was a constant concern, as monsoons could swell rivers and tidal plains within hours. Elevated channels, carved from basalt and reinforced with coral aggregates, directed water safely through the city while nourishing gardens and small freshwater reservoirs. These hydraulic systems reveal a population deeply attentive to environmental rhythms, merging practical necessity with ingenuity in a way that would have preserved both human life and ecological balance. Coral limestone terraces provided both structural integrity and ornamental beauty, harvested from shallow reefs without disrupting the ecosystem entirely. Blocks cut from the reefs were transported carefully along canals and mangrove channels, their rough surfaces eventually polished into intricate steps and walls. The terraces allowed buildings to rise above flood-prone areas, creating multi-level plazas and ceremonial spaces that enhanced visibility while protecting occupants. Their extraction, imagined responsibly, also reflects early human ingenuity in utilizing natural resources without destabilizing the surrounding environment. Public squares featured monumental carvings and stepped platforms, hinting at rituals tied to celestial cycles and seasonal floods. Observatories might have aligned with solstices or lunar phases, while raised platforms permitted communities to witness ritual processions or astronomical events. Carvings in basalt and coral could depict legendary creatures, environmental patterns, or mythic stories, encoding cultural memory into architecture. In Mu, human creativity intertwined with observation, producing spaces that celebrated both terrestrial and cosmic order, turning cities into living chronicles of civilization and imagination. Workshops and storage buildings integrated volcanic rock with reinforced clay, preserving tools, crops, and raw materials for thriving populations. Pottery and glass production areas, alongside tool-making stations, formed distinct districts, allowing specialization while keeping essential resources close to both residential and ceremonial zones. Early urban planning in Mu would have emphasized efficiency and safety, organizing settlements to accommodate daily life, craft production, and ritual practice in a coherent spatial logic. Even at this speculative stage, humans were shaping their environment with foresight, anticipating the needs of future generations. Beneath the streets and plazas, intricate networks of drainage channels and subterranean cisterns hinted at a civilization attuned to Mu's seasonal deluges and volcanic soil conditions. Rainwater collected in basalt-lined reservoirs, while aqueducts fed community gardens and orchards, ensuring food security even in the driest months. Small kilns and fire pits embedded along public walkways allowed for early clay treatment, glass annealing, and ritual fires, showing how technology and urban design intertwined seamlessly. These systems, though imagined, suggest that Mu's first cities were not only visually stunning, but also engineered to endure natural hazards, regulate water supply, and support dense populations without compromising sustainability. Residential quarters revealed a delicate balance between privacy and communal life, shaped by wind patterns, monsoon rains, and solar angles. Homes oriented to catch cooling breezes or capture morning light demonstrate the inhabitants' awareness of environmental dynamics. Courtyards provided shaded gathering spaces, while elevated platforms kept dwellings above flood levels. Each neighborhood reflected a negotiation between intimacy and community, offering shelter while fostering interaction, security, and cohesion in a continent where climate and terrain demanded constant vigilance and adaptation. Artisan districts showcased early metallurgy, glassworking, and coral sculpting, reflecting the ingenuity needed to adapt raw, volcanic, and marine resources. Kilns fired with volcanic heat, workshops polished translucent glass, and coral was intricately carved into decorative and functional items. Streets rang with the sounds of hammering, cutting, and grinding, while the scent of molten material mingled with ocean breezes. These areas were not merely productive, they were expressions of culture, blending utility with artistry, echoing Mu's vibrant ecological and geological diversity in every crafted object. As streets and plazas interwove with temples and ceremonial platforms, the human imprint on Mu began to signal not just survival, but a civilization shaped by shared beliefs that guided governance, social order, and communal life. Architecture became a language of interaction between humans and the natural world, echoing the rhythms of wind, tide, volcanic heat, and celestial cycles. Every building, pathway, and public space carried knowledge and intent, reflecting both environmental adaptation and cultural expression. In this imagined moment, Mu's cities were more than settlements. They were laboratories of human ingenuity, where devotion, law, and aesthetic sensibility intertwined, preparing the stage for the next chapter of imagined life, the sacred and ceremonial world that arises when architecture meets ritual and imagination, a mythology forged by tides and stars. As Mu's first cities glimmered under volcanic sunsets, its people looked skyward, seeing stories written among the stars. Every constellation, from familiar celestial bands to the imagined shapes reflected in the unique latitude of Mu, became a canvas upon which humans projected their hopes, fears, and observations. Star patterns were memorized and mapped to track seasonal cycles, ocean currents, and the migrations of terrestrial and marine species, blending practical survival knowledge with mythic narrative. In this imagined world, astronomy and storytelling merged, turning navigation, planting, and fishing into rituals intertwined with cosmic significance. Storms sweeping across coastal plazas became more than weather, they were messages from capricious deities of wind and water. As waves crashed and rain lashed the streets of basalt and coral, communities might have gathered in elevated squares or sacred terraces to interpret the signs, perform appeasement rituals, or recount tales of heroic figures who tamed or predicted storms. Observing the intensity, direction, and timing of these tempestuous events became an essential skill encoded within myths and songs that preserved environmental intelligence across generations. In Mu, natural forces were not only respected, they were sanctified. Tides that rose and fell with precision-inspired calendars, rituals, and myths, anchoring communal life in predictable cycles of oceanic rhythm. Children learned to anticipate the lunar-driven ebb and flow. Elders marked planting and harvesting schedules. And fishing expeditions were timed to coincide with optimal currents. Over time, these tidal observations may have evolved into symbolic representations, linking water deities, fertility, and communal prosperity, creating a mythology that reinforced the interdependence of humans and the sea. Mu's oceans were not merely sustenance, they were the heartbeat of civilization. Volcanic eruptions illuminated night skies with fire, prompting narratives of creation, destruction, and rebirth, woven into songs and carvings. When lava flowed across basalt terraces or ash blanketed distant valleys, humans may have interpreted these events as divine punishment, guidance, or generational lessons. Temples and ceremonial platforms were often positioned to witness these eruptions, allowing observers to integrate awe-inspiring natural displays into sacred practice. The unpredictable fury of Mu's volcanism became a central axis around which myth, morality, and communal memory revolved. Sacred groves, coral platforms, and basalt temples served as stages for ceremonial enactments of cosmic order and terrestrial harmony. Rituals may have mirrored tidal cycles, volcanic eruptions, or the passage of constellations across the horizon. Participants would enact myths through dance, song, or symbolic offerings, reinforcing shared values and collective memory. In these spaces, myth and architecture intertwine, making the environment itself a participant in cultural expression, teaching respect for the land while reinforcing the social bonds essential for survival. Constellations, shifting slowly over generations, became mnemonic guides, linking navigation, seasonal planting, and storytelling into cohesive cultural memory. As stars moved slightly over decades, mythic narratives evolved alongside them, blending empirical observation with imaginative interpretation. Mu's inhabitants may have developed complex oral traditions, encoding both practical knowledge and spiritual meaning within tales of heroic figures, celestial beasts, and ancestral spirits. In this way, the night sky functioned as both map and scripture, guiding movement across land and sea while shaping cultural identity. Meteor showers and eclipses were interpreted as messages from distant realms, their rarity and brilliance marking moments of communal reflection and ceremonial importance. Observing these transient celestial phenomena may have inspired temporary festivals, storytelling gatherings, and the creation of ephemeral art in sand, coral, or volcanic ash. The predictability or unpredictability of such events reinforced the connection between humans and the cosmos, while providing temporal markers to schedule agricultural cycles or oceanic voyages. In Mu, extraordinary astronomical events became catalysts for social cohesion, reinforcing mythic frameworks while grounding them in tangible observation. Mythic beings imagined in marine and terrestrial creatures provided moral lessons, embodied natural dangers, and guided hunting or foraging practices. Flying predators, tidal fish, and forest-dwelling mammals might have been cast as avatars of divine forces, teaching obedience, patience, or caution. Coral reefs and river systems became sacred landscapes, their creatures woven into narratives that reminded communities of environmental interdependence and survival imperatives. Mu's rich ecology offered endless inspiration for a mythology that simultaneously entertained, educated, and regulated behavior. Sacred pathways connecting coral temples, basalt plazas, and coastal lookouts formed ritual circuits that mirrored both terrestrial and celestial patterns. Processions along these routes might follow lunar phases or star alignments, combining physical movement with symbolic storytelling. Along the pathways, carvings, mosaics, and luminous coral markers could encode practical and spiritual guidance, reminding participants of tides, rainfall, and safe navigation routes. These ritual circuits functioned as living classrooms, teaching environmental awareness while embedding moral and cultural lessons in performative movement, uniting landscape, cosmos, and society in a cohesive spiritual experience. Oracular spaces and ritual artifacts encoded knowledge of tides, rainfall, and volcanic activity, blending survival with spirituality. Carved stones, ceremonial masks, and luminous coral sculptures may have served as both sacred objects and practical guides, recording cycles critical for planting, fishing, and settlement planning. These artifacts reinforced the connection between natural phenomena and human agency, reminding inhabitants that understanding Mu's rhythms was both a sacred duty and a necessity for thriving on an unpredictable continent. Music, chant, and dance transformed elemental observation into narrative, transmitting environmental wisdom across generations. Rhythmic patterns could mimic waves, wind, or volcanic tremors, embedding practical information in performative forms that resonated with memory and emotion. Participation in these activities reinforced communal cohesion, ensuring that each individual absorbed lessons about timing, risk, and ecological stewardship while celebrating the spectacle and wonder of their surroundings. Through these intertwined beliefs, Mu's people developed frameworks for cooperation, law, and societal structure, illustrating how the environment can shape the sacred and the social simultaneously. Mythology offered guidance on resource sharing, conflict resolution, and communal decision-making, creating a culture where spiritual observance and practical survival were inseparable. The sacred narratives of tides, stars, and fire became the invisible architecture governing behavior, relationships, and societal norms. In imagining these belief systems, we glimpse a culture that perceives the extraordinary not merely as spectacle, but as the very foundation for order, law, and cohesion, setting the stage for how Mu might govern itself and organize society in the chapters to come. A civilization guided by cosmic order. In the quiet intervals between tides, Mu's elders would convene, interpreting the lunar cycle to guide communal decisions. These gatherings were more than advisory councils, they were observatories of both the human and natural world, where political deliberation intersected with celestial rhythms. Lunar phases dictated agricultural timing, fishing schedules, and maritime expeditions, giving leaders both practical authority and ritual significance. By linking human law to cosmic cycles, the first societies of Mu established a shared temporal framework, creating predictability in an otherwise volatile environment of ocean storms, volcanic eruptions, and shifting winds. Trade and resource allocation followed patterns dictated by seasonal winds and monsoon forecasts, embedding natural observation into civic planning. Merchants and navigators adjusted schedules based on ocean currents, storm probabilities, and coastal flooding, while administrative scribes recorded these patterns in early codices carved into coral, limestone, and volcanic glass. Resource distribution was not arbitrary, but synchronized with predictable environmental cycles, allowing Mu's settlements to flourish without overtaxing their surrounding ecosystems. Commerce became a reflection of cosmic order, a tangible application of the mythic and practical knowledge encoded in the previous chapter. Alliances between settlements were often reinforced by ritual ceremonies that mirrored the alignment of constellations. Neighboring communities would gather along coastal terraces or basalt platforms during solstices or meteor showers, exchanging gifts, formalizing treaties, and performing coordinated dances that echoed the celestial patterns above. These symbolic gestures served both spiritual and pragmatic purposes, reinforcing bonds that ensured mutual defense, trade stability, and cultural cohesion across vast distances. The night sky, once a guide for navigation, became a unifying framework for diplomacy and collective security. Disputes were mediated in public squares aligned with solstices, lending cosmic significance to human judgment. Accusations of theft, land encroachment, or resource mismanagement were resolved under the gaze of stars that had been meticulously tracked for generations. Judges and elders referenced calendars synchronized with celestial events to determine the timing and method of adjudication. In this way, justice was both culturally sanctified and environmentally informed, binding society together through shared belief in the intertwining of human and cosmic law. Calendars etched into basalt platforms codified agricultural cycles, migrations, and civic obligations with precision. These monumental timekeepers, inscribed with glyphs, bas-reliefs, and luminous coral inlays, allowed populations to anticipate planting and harvest, track seasonal animal migrations, and schedule communal festivals. Knowledge of tides, winds, and lunar cycles was translated into civic infrastructure, shaping everything from water distribution to construction schedules. In Mu, time itself was a social instrument, ensuring alignment between human activity and natural rhythms. Record-keeping in Mu extended beyond stone and coral, embracing ephemeral markers that faded with tides and sun. Leaders might have used temporary sand inscriptions, coloured minerals, or reflective volcanic glass mosaics to log decisions, track disputes, or announce ceremonial dates. These impermanent systems encouraged active participation, requiring citizens to witness, memorize, and transmit civic knowledge orally, creating a culture where memory and observation reinforced governance. The act of recording and observing became itself a ritual, blending administration with communal engagement and reinforcing the link between people and the natural world. Symbols of authority, carved corals, polished volcanic glass, and luminous mosaics communicated societal roles and hierarchies. Priests, navigators, and community leaders were distinguished not only by deeds, but by the ceremonial artifacts they bore, each inscribed with celestial motifs and environmental indicators. These symbols served as reminders of responsibility, knowledge, and connection to the larger cosmic order. By making authority both visible and symbolic, Mu societies reinforced compliance, coordination, and reverence simultaneously. Observatories perched atop volcanic ridges allowed officials to monitor both the stars and the horizon for approaching storms or distant ships. These dual-purpose sites combined environmental surveillance with ritualistic observation, demonstrating the integration of safety, planning, and spiritual authority. Leaders who accurately predicted tides, solar cycles, or seasonal wind shifts were revered not only for practical wisdom, but for perceived cosmic insight, blurring the line between governance and priesthood. The physical placement of these observatories also emphasized the interdependence of natural geography and societal order, anchoring law in the contours of the land itself. Naval expeditions and exploratory voyages were synchronized with celestial navigation and tidal knowledge, reinforcing leadership legitimacy. Leaders who could predict currents, lunar tides, or seasonal storms were revered as both practical experts and spiritual guides. Voyages of trade, discovery, or resource acquisition were opportunities to demonstrate mastery over both environment and cosmos, cementing political legitimacy while expanding Mu's influence across distant shores. The success of these expeditions often determined a settlement's survival and prosperity, illustrating the direct interplay between knowledge, leadership, and environmental stewardship. Ceremonial feasts aligned with celestial phenomena, codified communal hierarchy, and economic coordination. During meteor showers or solstices, settlements might gather to redistribute food, celebrate successful harvests, and reaffirm alliances. These gatherings reinforced social bonds, displayed political legitimacy, and embedded cosmological symbolism into civic life. By connecting environmental observation, resource management, and communal celebration, Mu's society ensured that governance, survival, and myth were inseparable, strengthening cohesion across generations. Ritualized gatherings combined performance, observation, and lawmaking, making governance a visible, participatory act. Citizens would witness and sometimes join councils, ceremonies, and enactments of law, embedding societal norms in collective memory. Observations of volcanic activity, tides, and star patterns were presented alongside proclamations, decrees, and moral instruction, blending authority, entertainment, and education. Governance in Mu was thus inseparable from the cosmos, transforming civic duty into a shared, almost sacred experience. Codified myths and environmental law became legal precedent, guiding ethics, property rights, and cooperative behavior. Stories of past leaders, catastrophic storms, or miraculous animal encounters were embedded into procedural norms, reinforcing caution, fairness, and community cohesion. Laws were not solely abstract constructs but living narratives that reflected environmental realities, ensuring that survival imperatives were codified alongside moral and spiritual guidance. Mu's mythology, once a framework for understanding the natural world, now informs every facet of civic life. In the very stones of Mu, human skill, awareness of the cosmos, and ecological insight came together, forming the blueprint for the civilization's future accomplishments. By aligning governance with tides, lunar phases, and stellar observations, Mu achieved stability that allowed innovation to flourish. Urban planning, monumental construction, specialized craftsmanship, and cultural expression all thrived under a society guided by natural rhythms. The harmony of law, ritual, and observation created a fertile ground for human creativity, preparing the way for a civilization whose ingenuity might rival its mythic origins, while offering a vision of what it means for humanity to be both part of and in awe of the cosmos. Technologies born from volcanoes and coral reefs. On the rugged volcano flanks, obsidian and pumice were gathered by Mu's inhabitants, used in cutting, artistry, and ritual practices. Sharp edges of volcanic glass allowed them to craft tools for survival, artistry, and recording celestial patterns. Pumice, lightweight and porous, provided insulation and construction materials for dwellings and ceremonial platforms. In imagining these applications, one can see how Mu's geology would have fostered a culture of experimentation, transforming hazards into resources with ingenuity and reverence. Intricate aqueducts and coral-reinforced terraces channeled fresh water and nutrients across cities, blending utility with artistry. Water management became central, using carved channels and natural coral scaffolding to prevent flooding, irrigate crops, and sustain urban gardens. These innovations were simultaneously functional and symbolic, reinforcing the connection between people, natural resources, and the divine cycles observed in the stars and tides. In Mu, infrastructure was both a necessity and a ritual, echoing the philosophical intertwining of practical survival with cultural expression. Tidal patterns and reef formations informed early maritime engineering, guiding hull design, navigation, and anchorage. Boats shaped to glide over reefs safely approached distant shores, while navigators read subtle wave patterns to predict hazards. Seasonal winds, combined with astronomical markers, informed route planning and voyage timing, allowing explorers to traverse vast stretches of the Pacific. The ocean became a teacher, and its rhythms were encoded into the very craft of Mu's seafarers. Ingenious aquaculture systems emerged, where coral reefs met tidal channels, allowing Mu's inhabitants to cultivate fish, shellfish, and algae. By manipulating currents and reef structures, early engineers could trap and harvest abundant marine resources while preserving natural ecosystems. These systems doubled as natural laboratories, teaching patterns of growth, predator-prey relationships, and seasonal migration. The innovations demonstrate how Mu's technological imagination arose directly from observing and respecting ecological cycles, blending utility with ecological foresight. Volcanic heat-powered primitive smelting and ceramics, producing tools and containers that transformed daily life. By harnessing residual geothermal energy, Muans could melt certain metals, harden ceramics, or cook at high temperatures without relying solely on firewood. This technological adaptation enhanced survival and allowed for durable trade goods, religious artifacts, and utilitarian vessels. The interplay of natural energy sources and human ingenuity exemplifies how Mu's environment shaped innovation. Shaped and polished, volcanic glass became lenses and mirrors, enabling basic optical tools for both guidance and ritual use. Reflective surfaces allowed tracking of the sun, moon, and stars with unprecedented precision, refined timekeeping, and even signaling between settlements. Such tools also enhanced ceremonial lighting, creating dazzling patterns that synchronized with festivals and civic events. Utility and spectacle merged seamlessly, illustrating how technology in Mu was practical and cultural. Luminous coral and mineral pigments were integrated into signaling devices and artistic communication across settlements. These natural light sources enabled messages to be conveyed over long distances at night, indicating tides, approaching storms, or ceremonial timings. Artistic expression and practical communication merged, creating technologies both functional and beautiful. In Mu, even aesthetics were intertwined with utility, reinforcing the bond between environmental awareness and cultural sophistication. Bridges, plazas, and fortifications utilized basalt, lava, and coral composites, reflecting an instinctive mastery of structural physics. The density and durability of these materials allowed elevated walkways, defensive walls, and monumental civic spaces. Architects and engineers, inspired by observation and experimentation, developed construction methods attuned to seismic activity, tides, and volcanic tremors. Mu's built environment reflected both the land's challenges and its abundant resources, merging resilience with artistry. Observation platforms at reef edges recorded currents, fish migrations, and storm activity, feeding both survival and scientific curiosity. From these vantage points, early Muans could anticipate environmental shifts, plan maritime expeditions, and inform civic decisions. Knowledge accumulated at these platforms was encoded in oral histories, ceremonial instruction, and structural markers, creating a culture of integrated observation. Science and daily life were inseparable, with technological ingenuity rooted directly in interaction with the natural world. Innovations in storage, preservation, and transport evolved in response to tidal extremes, salinity shifts, and seasonal abundance. Elevated granaries, coral-lined storage pits, and waterproofed containers stabilized food supply and trade commodities. The variability of the ocean and climate made these adaptations essential, while providing the basis for economic and societal expansion. Solutions harmonized with environmental rhythms, turning vulnerability into opportunity. Using the rise and fall of tides, early water wheels and channel systems generated power for milling, aqueducts, and processing grain. By observing ocean currents and tidal ranges, Muse engineers could convert water flow into rotational energy. These mechanical innovations reduced labour, enhanced food production, and laid the groundwork for later technological advances. In Mu, even natural forces became extensions of human ingenuity, blurring the boundary between environment and civilization. Nighttime illumination relied on bioluminescent coral and mineral compounds, creating glowing pathways and workspaces along aqueducts and plazas. These luminescent installations allowed safe nocturnal navigation, extended productive hours, and reinforced ceremonial symbolism. Integrating biology, geology, and engineering, Muans transformed their cities into living, luminous landscapes. The glow of coral-lined streets underscored how innovation was inseparable from aesthetic, practical, and spiritual life. Experimental designs merged environmental observation, material properties, and communal knowledge into functional technology. Trial and error, guided by necessity and ritualized practice, encouraged iterative improvement in tools, structures, and maritime craft. Knowledge was shared communally, with each innovation tested, refined, and codified into collective expertise. Technology in Mu was a dynamic interplay of landscape, ecosystem, and human collaboration. By mastering these innovations, Mu harnessed both volcanic landscapes and coral ecosystems to propel societal growth, preparing its people for daring voyages across the Pacific. With resilient infrastructure, versatile tools, advanced maritime craft, and ingenious energy solutions, the continent became a hub of experimentation and applied knowledge. Innovation was inseparable from observation, ritual, and social structure, ensuring that technological prowess strengthened community cohesion. These achievements laid the foundation for Mu's imagined dominance in transoceanic exploration, illustrating how a society in harmony with its environment could reach extraordinary heights of ingenuity. A Pacific world connected by Mu, navigating by the stars and ocean swells, Mu's sailors ventured beyond familiar reefs into the open Pacific. Using their knowledge of tides, currents, and wind patterns, early expeditions traced routes that could link distant islands and continents. The ocean was a vast, shifting classroom, where subtle variations in swell, height, colour, and direction revealed hidden reefs, deep channels, and potential landing sites. Observing seasonal monsoons, celestial markers, and oceanic eddies, navigators charted courses that were at once practical, ceremonial, and spiritual, blending survival, science, and artistry. Each journey became a lesson in environmental literacy, teaching the Muans how the vast Pacific could be both a pathway and a teacher, while also shaping communal identity through shared maritime mastery. At first contact with Polynesian archipelagos, gifts of obsidian tools and coral vessels were exchanged, blending artistry and utility. Islanders marveled at the resilience of Muan construction techniques and the glint of volcanic glass cut with near-perfect precision, while Muans admired the intricate weaving, tattooed motifs, and navigation markers of the archipelagos. Exchanges of stories, songs, and navigational secrets enriched both cultures, creating shared knowledge of currents, reef systems, and celestial patterns. Each visit was punctuated by feasts, ritual performances, and ceremonial displays that communicated both goodwill and technical expertise. These encounters fostered trust, curiosity, and collaboration, sowing the seeds of an interconnected Pacific civilization where culture and technology co-evolved. The winds carried Muan's knowledge of tides, navigation, and aquaculture to distant Asian coasts, sparking curiosity and innovation. Fishermen and engineers observed coral-based fish traps, tidal energy channels, and reef-enhanced aquaculture, incorporating ideas into local systems. Craftsmen experimented with basalt, volcanic glass, and coral composites, producing hybrid tools, vessels, and ceremonial artifacts that bore the hallmark of distant inspiration. Festivals and civic projects often commemorated these exchanges, embedding foreign techniques into local celebrations. Through these movements of knowledge, Mu's ingenuity reached beyond geography, demonstrating how environment-inspired technology could ripple across oceans and societies. Across the Americas, Muan explorers shared techniques for volcanic glasswork and reef-based agriculture, leaving traces of influence in coastal societies. By demonstrating methods of coral terrace construction, tidal irrigation, and fish farming strategies, Muans contributed to early forms of sustainable coastal agriculture. Coastal communities adapted obsidian blades, volcanic tools, and aquaculture methods, integrating them with local materials and knowledge. The introduction of Muan watercraft and modular navigation tools expanded the horizons of local voyages, enabling longer, safer coastal travel. In this imagined network, ideas flowed as fluidly as the ocean currents, reshaping human adaptation and demonstrating the transformative power of distant cultural contact. Trade networks flourished, exchanging food crops, pigments, ceremonial objects, and navigational lore across vast oceanic distances. Sweet potatoes, taro, coconuts, tropical fruits, dyes, pigments, carved figurines, and encoded knowledge of tides and stars were transported across thousands of kilometers. Each shipment was a vessel of culture as much as commerce, with objects carrying symbolism, technical insight, and ritual meaning. Merchants, sailors, and priests alike became conduits of information, spreading Mu's technological and cultural influence. In Mu, commerce and curiosity were inseparable, driving technological advancement, societal cohesion, and an expanding horizon of knowledge. Maritime festivals and collaborative construction projects celebrated alliances, embedding Muan culture into foreign landscapes. Ceremonial voyages coincided with seasonal winds and astronomical events, blending navigation with ritual and pageantry. Islands became stages for intercultural collaboration, with coral terraces, ceremonial platforms, and docks constructed under shared guidance. Music, dance, and art intertwined with practical labor, transmitting knowledge of construction, navigation, and celestial observation. These events reinforced alliances, transmitted knowledge, and offered vivid symbols of Mu's influence, both tangible and ideological, leaving echoes across distant shores. Knowledge of currents, monsoons, and star paths was codified into oral and symbolic systems, enabling successive generations to traverse the Pacific. Songs, chants, and visual markers recorded subtle shifts in weather and tidal patterns, creating a living map for explorers. Apprentices learned to read wind and swell, follow reef shadows, and track the subtle fluorescence of night-blooming ocean algae. Oral histories were intertwined with ceremonial performance, ensuring retention and precision over generations. In Mu, technology, navigation, and education fused into cultural practice, creating a resilient framework for exploration and survival. Mu's own artistic and technological practices evolved through these encounters, absorbing motifs, materials, and techniques from distant lands. Decorative patterns inspired by Polynesian tattoos, Asian ceramics, and coastal American carvings merged with Muan symbolism, producing hybrid aesthetics found in textiles, pottery, and architectural ornamentation. Tools and craft methods were refined based on observed practices elsewhere, fostering innovation through selective adaptation. Every return voyage enriched Mu, making the continent itself a crucible of transoceanic culture, where artistic expression, technology, and exploration were inseparable. Maps etched on coral, sand, and bark depicted the expanding web of connections, blending science, art, and collective memory. These charts marked currents, reefs, seasonal winds, trading posts, and ceremonial sites, creating an accessible record of journeys across thousands of kilometers. Storytelling, ritual markers, and material symbols complemented cartography, embedding environmental literacy and exploration into communal consciousness. In Mu, mapping was as much cultural as it was technical, reflecting the integration of knowledge, aesthetics, and survival. Apprentices learned to read the ocean as one reads a story, navigating with intuition honed by centuries of observation. Agricultural exchanges reshaped coastal diets and farming methods as Mu's explorers introduced new crops and irrigation strategies. Techniques for terrace farming, soil stabilization, and reef-assisted aquaculture were shared, allowing distant societies to cultivate fish, seaweed, and other marine resources. Reciprocal imports of native plants and seeds from these regions enriched Mu's own agricultural diversity, creating an early form of globalized horticulture. These practices demonstrated how ecological knowledge could travel alongside cultural and technological innovation. In weaving together islands, continents, and cultures, Mu became not only a hub of exploration, but a crucible of transoceanic exchange, enriching its own civilization in the process. Culinary traditions blended, technological insights spread, and artistic motifs intermingled, creating a dynamic, outward-looking society whose customs, arts, and ideas evolved with every encounter. Every voyage, trade, and cultural exchange added layers to Mu's identity, producing a civilization shaped as much by contact as by its unique environment. In this imagined Pacific world, the continent stood at the center of an evolving network, illustrating how curiosity and interaction could transform not only one land, but the entire oceanic sphere it touched. Art, language, and imagination of a lost civilization. Imbued with knowledge from distant shores, Muan artists transformed raw materials into vivid symbols and pigments. Coral reefs provided powders of soft pinks and vibrant reds. Volcanic minerals yielded deep blacks and shimmering greys, and crushed shells offered subtle, opalescent highlights. Each pigment carried more than colour, it encoded environmental observation, ceremonial significance, and technical mastery. Murals on basalt terraces illustrated ocean currents, reef structures, and celestial alignments, blending artistic expression with functional information that could guide navigation, resource gathering, or ritual timing. The rhythm of ocean waves shaped musical traditions, guiding the construction of instruments that echoed the tides. Hollow coral and bamboo became natural resonators, producing low hums and high-pitched tones that mirrored the swell and crash of nearby waters. Shell trumpets projected sound across lagoons, while stone chimes captured the echoes of volcanic vibrations. Music was more than entertainment, it was a method of instruction, helping young Muans internalize wind patterns, tidal cycles, and seasonal shifts. Ceremonial performances often synchronized with sunrise, sunset, and lunar phases, integrating environmental literacy into every note. Coral limestone, volcanic glass, and mineral powders became the palette for murals, ceremonial objects, and navigational charts. Frescoes depicted the life cycles of fish, birds, and marine mammals, each annotated with observational symbols that guided sustainable harvesting. Volcanic glass carved into figurines captured the glint of sunlight over water, offering both aesthetic pleasure and scientific detail in form and proportion. Even everyday pottery carried layered designs, encoding currents, wind directions, and reef hazards, blending utility, beauty, and ecological knowledge into a single artifact. Scripts etched on shells, bamboo, and bark encoded not only language but environmental observations and star paths. Symbols indicated tides, reef positions, and seasonal monsoon shifts, forming a written system simultaneously poetic and practical. Children and apprentices were taught these scripts alongside oral storytelling, learning to read both narrative and natural rhythms. In Mu, language and literacy were inseparable from observation and imagination, ensuring that knowledge of navigation, ecology, and culture persisted across generations. Ceremonial performances combined sound, movement, and celestial alignment, merging art with astronomical knowledge. Dances enacted the rising and setting of constellations, the ebb of tides, and the migration of ocean birds. Costumes incorporated bioluminescent pigments and reflective volcanic shards, simulating starlight across stage and reef. Songs included encoded directions, warnings, and ecological lessons, transforming performance into a living map of the continent's resources and hazards. In this imagined civilization, art was a vessel for both beauty and survival. Shared motifs from Polynesian, Asian, and American cultures blended into Muan aesthetic, creating hybrid visual and auditory forms. Geometric carvings mimicked Pacific navigation symbols, while patterns of Asian ceramics inspired ceremonial vessels. Coastal American iconography influenced decorative motifs in textiles and headdresses. These incorporations were not passive. Muans actively interpreted, adapted, and expanded them to fit their environment, creating a civilization both unique and cosmopolitan, whose imagination bridged vast distances across the Pacific. Children learned the patterns of waves, winds, and stars through song, dance, and storytelling, linking imagination to observation. Games mimicked the currents, storms, and tides, transforming abstract knowledge into embodied practice. Narratives of heroic navigators, reef guardians, and celestial guides reinforced both moral codes and scientific principles. In Mu, education was multisensory, participatory, and deeply integrated with environmental awareness, fostering creativity that would inform future exploration, technology, and cultural production. Instruments made from hollow coral, wood, and shells resonated with the low hum of tides and the high pitch of wind over reefs. Musical ensembles imitated the oscillations of the ocean, the cry of seabirds, and the whisper of volcanic vents. Some instruments were designed to measure environmental conditions, chimes that shifted with wind intensity, drums tuned to resonance frequencies indicating seismic tremors. Through music, Muans could interpret the natural world as a series of interconnected rhythms, blurring the line between art, science, and ritual. Paints and dyes derived from algae, volcanic minerals, and fish pigments offered colors unseen in other cultures, evoking the vibrancy of Mu itself. Bioluminescent algae, carefully cultured in coastal pools, provided ethereal blues and greens for night rituals. Red and ochre tones drawn from coral and volcanic rock encoded ceremonial calendars and navigational markers in vivid imagery. Every artwork, from mural to textile, was a repository of ecological, technological, and astronomical knowledge, making creativity inseparable from survival and cultural identity. In their artistic and written practices, Muans captured environmental, technological, and social wisdom, seeding ideas for generations to come. Scripts, songs, pigments, and instruments were not static. They evolved alongside observation and experimentation, adapting to new islands, reefs, and celestial insights. Art became a lens through which scientific curiosity was nurtured and imagination fueled practical innovation. In this imagined world, every creative act, every mural, melody, or carved script was a bridge between the human mind, the natural world, and the cosmos, ensuring that curiosity, ingenuity, and cultural identity were always intertwined. Reflecting on this interplay of imagination, observation, and innovation, one can envision Mu not merely as a landmass of mystery, but as a civilization where creativity catalyzed knowledge and discovery. The colors, sounds, and symbols of this lost continent were more than aesthetic. They were a functional interface with the environment, guiding navigation, agriculture, and social cohesion. Each cultural expression became both a scientific instrument and a poetic statement, illustrating how a society shaped by ocean, reef, and sky might develop a uniquely holistic worldview. Creativity in Mu was the precursor to scientific insight, suggesting that the continent's brilliance lay not only in exploration, but in the fertile imagination that made understanding the world possible. Scientists of the imagined Pacific Giant, inspired by the subtle rhythms recorded in murals and music, Muans began to formalize observation into structured inquiry. The patterns of tides, waves, and celestial alignments that once guided artistic expression became the basis for systematic study. Apprentices recorded repetitive environmental cycles in symbolic charts, translating music, murals, and dance into measurable phenomena. In this way, the aesthetic and the empirical converged, turning centuries of cultural observation into a functional scientific methodology. Examining tides, reefs, and the changing coast, Muans built predictive models that shaped travel routes and agricultural planning. Muans charted current speeds across lagoons and between islands, noting how seasonal monsoons altered water temperature and nutrient flow. They hypothesized the impact of reef structures on wave energy and shoreline stability, applying this knowledge to safeguard settlements and optimize fishing practices. These early models not only ensured survival, but also allowed a nuanced understanding of the dynamic oceanic environment surrounding Mu. Volcanic activity was mapped with meticulous precision, revealing cycles, vent systems, and geothermal potentials for settlement and resource extraction. Basalt flows were traced over centuries, while fissures emitting steam and ash were catalogued to anticipate eruptions. Using rudimentary seismographs constructed from volcanic glass and pendulums, muons detected subtle ground vibrations, gaining predictive insight into volcanic behavior. The careful observation of lava chemistry informed the creation of durable tools, ceramics, and pigments for both artistic and functional purposes, demonstrating the seamless integration of science and craft. Deep-sea exploration, using coral skeleton submersibles and tethered observation platforms, uncovered new marine species and bioluminescent ecosystems. Muons recorded the behaviors of fish that emitted soft green light, documented the predatory patterns of deep-water cephalopods, and identified previously unknown coral formations. These explorations expanded their understanding of marine biodiversity, ecological networks, and potential sources of food and materials. Observations were painstakingly translated into diagrams, combining aesthetic clarity with scientific detail, ensuring the knowledge could be communicated across generations and geographies. Meteorological records, encoded in symbolic charts, allowed early prediction of monsoons, cyclones, and seasonal wind shifts. Observers tracked cloud formations, barometric changes, and wind patterns, cross-referencing with tidal behavior and ocean currents. These predictive methods informed crop cycles, navigational planning, and even the timing of religious or communal rituals, demonstrating how science in Mu was intimately tied to daily life. Celestial observations were layered onto these meteorological data, creating a holistic framework connecting atmosphere, ocean, and sky. Apprentices recorded experiments with water currents, fish migration, and reef growth, transforming artistic representation into scientific method. By simulating tidal flows in scaled lagoon models or mapping reef expansion over decades, muons developed hypotheses about marine ecology and sedimentation. These experiments informed sustainable harvesting practices and guided settlement expansion, illustrating how the pursuit of knowledge was both imaginative and pragmatic. Observation, measurement, and creative visualization were inseparable, each reinforcing the other. Engineers of the reefs devised aquaculture grids that mimicked natural coral formations, cultivating fish and shellfish in sustainable patterns. These experimental lagoons allowed controlled breeding, monitored nutrient cycles, and maintained ecological balance, effectively merging food production with environmental stewardship. Apprentices tested different coral arrangements and water flows, discovering optimal layouts that enhanced growth rates and resilience. This early form of ecosystem management reflected Muon's deep understanding of both biology and physics. Observers experimented with bioluminescent organisms, measuring light emissions to understand chemical reactions and tidal behavior. Small-scale experiments with glowing plankton and reef animals provided insights into nutrient availability, nocturnal activity patterns, and environmental changes. Muons used these natural indicators to anticipate shifts in fish populations, predict tidal surges, and guide nighttime navigation. Art, music, and scientific experimentation overlapped seamlessly, producing knowledge that was simultaneously poetic, functional, and empirical. Material science emerged from volcanic glass, coral composites, and organic pigments, producing resilient tools, instruments, and measurement devices. Glass blades reinforced with coral fibers, created precision cutting tools, while dense basalt weights measured current speed and wave force. Pigments derived from algae and minerals served not only in art but also as indicators of chemical reactions and environmental conditions. Every artifact, instrument, and experimental apparatus reflected an intimate understanding of Mu's natural resources, embodying the union of creativity and technology. Muans developed precise calendrical systems, integrating lunar cycles, solar positions, and oceanic rhythms to optimize agriculture and navigation. Months were structured around tidal peaks and lows, while celestial alignments marked the passage of seasons crucial for planting and harvesting. Coastal and inland settlements synchronized these calendars with resource availability, ensuring food security and coordinated trade. Such systems, while sophisticated, were communicated through symbols, songs, and visual displays, allowing knowledge to permeate society beyond scholars and practitioners. Surveyors used pendulums, sun shadows, and magnetic stones to chart mountains, bays, and volcanoes with unprecedented accuracy. Landmarks were triangulated across islands, and navigational aids were incorporated into maps that blended geometry, observation, and artistic symbolism. Such mapping techniques informed settlement placement, resource extraction, and maritime travel, illustrating how Muans translated natural phenomena into actionable knowledge. The results were navigational charts and city plans that harmonized with both the ocean and the land. Insights from voyages and local observation combined to form predictive datasets, steering exploration, trade networks, and ecological management. Muans meticulously recorded differences in reef structures, current velocities, and storm frequencies across the Pacific. These comparative studies enabled safer navigation, informed settlement planning, and fostered a nuanced understanding of global oceanic patterns. Knowledge of distant lands was continually integrated into local practice, forming an early model of transoceanic scientific collaboration, treating land, sea, and sky as open textbooks. Muans turned the world into a laboratory, cultivating knowledge that propelled their culture and technology forward. Artistic traditions, once primarily aesthetic, became tools of observation and experimentation. Murals, music, and ceremonial records codified empirical data, blending imagination with analytic rigor. In this imagined world, scientific mastery was inseparable from cultural expression, ensuring that every innovation, from navigation to material engineering, was rooted in both observation and creativity. On Mu's Islands and along its lagoons, the pulse of scientific inquiry coursed through daily routines, influencing both culture and survival. The careful study of tides, volcanoes, and marine life laid the foundation for technologies and knowledge systems that would make Mu a hub of transoceanic insight. Every observation, experiment, and artistic codification strengthened the continent's ability to thrive amid environmental challenges. In this imagined timeline, the ingenuity of Muans not only advanced understanding of their own world, but also set the stage for a powerful Pacific civilization, one capable of influencing the wider seas and islands beyond their shores. If empires met Mu, over the western horizon, the first foreign fleets caught sight of Mu's gleaming coral cities. Ships, built of seasoned timber and painted sails, slowed as their crews took in settlements shimmering with volcanic glass and coral limestone, rising seamlessly from the water's edge. Mariners whispered of walls aligned with currents, canals that mirrored tidal patterns, and harbours designed to accommodate both local and distant vessels. In this imagined scenario, The arrival of outsiders would mark the collision of knowledge systems, one forged over millennia of Pacific observation, the other honed in the competitive courts and ports of distant continents. Diplomatic emissaries marveled at infrastructure aligned with tides, currents, and volcanic formations. Muons welcomed visitors with feasts timed to lunar cycles, displaying agricultural terraces and aquaculture grids that demonstrated a sophisticated grasp of ecology. Envoys recorded the use of volcanic glass instruments, navigational devices, and celestial charts, noting how these tools synchronized with the rhythms of the ocean. The resulting impression would not be of a primitive people, as outsiders might assume, but of a civilization whose mastery of the environment rivaled any empire they had known. Weapons forged from basalt and volcanic glass challenged traditional notions of warfare and defense. Fortifications incorporated natural lava flows, reinforced coral battlements, and hidden canals that could flood or drain strategic areas. Defensive towers doubled as observation posts, aligned to star paths for early warning, while projectiles crafted from dense stone or volcanic shards could pierce conventional armor. The technological ingenuity of Muons, rooted in environmental adaptation rather than brute force, would force foreign powers to reconsider military strategies entirely. Guides of Mu charted the strangers' ships against the patterns of wind, tide, and star. Navigators demonstrated intimate knowledge of currents between islands, seasonal monsoons, and the shifting positions of constellations across the Pacific. By comparing these observations to the foreign vessels' trajectories, Muons could predict movements, optimize trade routes, or avoid conflict. This integration of oceanography, astronomy, and practical experience highlighted the continent's unique synthesis of art, science, and survival. Routes of commerce shifted as exotic goods and knowledge flowed in unprecedented directions. Mu's abundant marine resources, pearls, rare shells, and reef-harvested minerals became highly sought commodities, while foreign arrivals introduced spices, metals, and textile innovations. Exchanges were not one-sided. Muons exported astronomical records, architectural insights, and agricultural techniques that transformed both local and regional practices. Trade became a conduit for cultural as well as material enrichment, establishing a Pacific network unparalleled in history. Conflicts arose not merely from ambition, but from fundamental differences in environmental mastery and cosmology. Foreign rulers, accustomed to linear hierarchies and fixed territories, struggled to interpret one's political structures, organized around tides, volcanic cycles, and celestial alignments. Negotiations over land, resources, and maritime access revealed profound divergences in worldview, sometimes sparking tension or miscommunication. Yet these challenges also highlighted the adaptability and ingenuity of Muons, who balanced diplomacy, environmental knowledge, and strategic foresight with remarkable skill. Maps and scientific records became instruments of both understanding and negotiation. Charts detailing reef locations, current flows, and seasonal winds were shared selectively, functioning as both gifts and safeguards. Muons demonstrated how geography itself could be encoded in art, music, and ceremonial display, making knowledge a living, negotiable medium. Foreign powers, in turn, documented their observations, resulting in hybrid cartographies that blended Muon wisdom with European or Asian mapping conventions. Additional pages of these maps detailed seasonal migrations of fish, optimal harvesting times, and the positioning of coral nurseries, revealing a civilization whose science was inseparable from daily life. Every encounter forced Muons and foreign powers to reassess assumptions about power, technology, and culture. Learning from one another, they observed innovations in governance, engineering, and military strategy that challenged preconceptions. Muans noted the efficiency of foreign agricultural tools, while visitors recognized the precision of reef-based aquaculture and tide-synchronized irrigation. Music, ritual, and astronomy became mediums of negotiation. Ceremonies timed to solstices and eclipses conveyed both respect and intent. In this imagined world, confrontation became collaboration, and cultural arrogance gave way to mutual adaptation, transforming the very definition of empire in the Pacific. Strategic alliances formed along environmental, cultural, and celestial lines, reshaping the Pacific balance. Marriages between Muan leaders and visiting envoys symbolized political as well as astronomical alignment, while joint projects, harbors, observatories, and trade stations linked islands across vast distances. Seasonal calendars, lunar festivals, and star charts became instruments of diplomacy, ensuring that alliances were not just contractual, but environmentally and ritually coherent. Knowledge of tides, volcanoes, and reef dynamics guided these agreements, turning the natural world itself into a mediator of human affairs. Beyond diplomacy and trade, Muans influenced foreign empires with their understanding of oceanic engineering. Artificial canals, levees, and coral terraces demonstrated how settlements could thrive despite rising tides and tropical storms. Observers recorded techniques for reinforcing coastal cities with volcanic rubble, managing sediment flows, and cultivating marine life to supplement food security. These insights, exported to other regions, would alter the technological trajectories of entire civilizations, suggesting a Pacific world where environmental mastery was as prized as territorial conquest. In imagining these first interactions, we see the threads of a global order that might never have been. Empires encountering Mu would confront a civilization whose knowledge of nature, science, and art challenged every expectation. Trade, diplomacy, and conflict are intertwined, demonstrating how an advanced Pacific continent could reshape cultural, technological, and political trajectories across oceans. In this alternate history, Mu's presence not only altered the fates of explorers and rulers, but also transformed the possibilities of human civilization itself, suggesting a world where curiosity, ingenuity, and environmental mastery rewrote the narrative of global history. Observing these exchanges, one imagines how the modern era might inherit a Pacific continent already rich with alliances, knowledge, and culture, setting the stage for a powerful and interconnected world. Mu in the modern world we never had. At the dawn of Mu's imagined modern era, cities emerge like living reefs along the horizon. Coral limestone megastructures climb skyward, their surfaces polished by centuries of sunlight and salt, while canals trace intricate patterns across urban districts. Volcanic glass towers glint like jewels amid the greenery of urban parks, blending human design with natural materials that respond to seismic and tidal activity. In this alternate timeline, Mu's architecture tells a story of environmental mastery, a civilization that coalesced around the rhythms of the ocean, the pulses of volcanoes, and the patterns of the stars. In the veins of the coastal metropolises, aquaculture and tidal energy grids operate with silent, unerring efficiency. Generators draw power from the ebb and flow of the Pacific, while reef-enclosed bays support dense networks of shellfish, algae, and coral cultivation. These systems are not merely technological marvels, they form a living dialogue with the environment, demonstrating how an advanced society could harmonize urbanization and natural ecosystems. Data collected from tidal sensors, marine drones, and biological monitoring stations guide both local industry and broader ecological planning, allowing Muans to thrive without depleting the resources that sustain them. Within forests sculpted by millennia of ecological mastery, species evolved in isolation now flourish alongside human ingenuity. Giant amphibians, arboreal reptiles, and bioluminescent insects coexist with pollinator-optimized orchards and carefully managed wildlife corridors. Humans interact with these species in a way that blends scientific observation and cultural ritual, from nocturnal festivals celebrating luminous insects to agricultural practices timed to rare migrations. In this imagined world, biodiversity is not only preserved but actively enhanced, reflecting a civilization that learned to anticipate and integrate the rhythms of life itself. Amid coral-banked thoroughfares, volcanic glass spires shine under the sun, reflecting the labor and vision of many generations. Marketplaces bustle with the trade of rare minerals, reef-harvested pearls, and pigment-rich corals used in art and ceremonial attire. Workshops hum with artisans crafting tools, instruments, and architectural elements that combine aesthetics, functionality, and environmental resilience. Every building, every street, becomes a testament to centuries of human adaptation to the extraordinary geology and climate of Mu, illustrating how a civilization shaped by water and fire could cultivate both beauty and durability. In classrooms, observatories, and laboratories, Muans study both ocean currents and distant stars, continuing traditions begun centuries ago. Students measure tidal flows against lunar cycles, map coral health in real time, and track volcanic activity with sensors that feed predictive models. Astronomers chart stellar constellations that guided ancient voyages, while ecologists experiment with genetically diverse flora to reinforce ecosystem resilience. Knowledge is cumulative and integrative. Science and daily life remain inseparable, a reflection of a society where curiosity and practical necessity are woven into the cultural fabric. Following trade routes that spanned Mu and distant lands, languages, music, and culinary arts blended into a vibrant cultural mosaic. Spices from Asia mingle with reef-harvested salts, while songs inspired by ocean rhythms harmonize with foreign instruments and scales. Written scripts incorporate celestial symbols, encoding both records of commerce and poetic reflections. Trade becomes a vehicle for cultural exchange, and the influences of centuries of interaction ripple outward, demonstrating the transformative power of curiosity, dialogue, and adaptation. Under the relentless cliffs, enduring monuments honor generations of adaptation and survival. Stone obelisks etched with tidal, volcanic, and astronomical data stand as both historical record and cultural art. These structures educate, inspire, and remind citizens of the fragile balance that underpins Mu's prosperity. Observing them, one can trace a lineage of ingenuity, where each generation built upon the lessons of the past, blending observation, ritual, and innovation to maintain harmony with a volatile environment. On festival nights, communities celebrate lunar and solar cycles, blending ritual, science, and artistry in ways foreign visitors would marvel at. Fireworks ignite above coral-studded plazas, choreographed to reflect constellations, while drummers mimic ocean tides and wind patterns. Children learn about astronomy, marine biology, and geometry through dance, song, and storytelling, ensuring that cultural knowledge remains vibrant and deeply rooted in environmental understanding. In this world, celebration is inseparable from learning, and joy reinforces curiosity, creating a society where culture and science co-evolve. At research institutes, engineers, and ecologists innovate using volcanic minerals and coral composites, producing technologies unseen anywhere else on Earth. Buildings are reinforced with hybrid materials that absorb seismic shocks, while floating platforms harvest energy from tides and waves. Bioluminescent algae illuminate streets and plazas, reducing dependence on artificial lighting while serving as living indicators of water quality. These advances illustrate a civilization that turned geological hazards into opportunities, designing technology in harmony with natural forces rather than in opposition to them. Finally, standing atop a cliff or aboard a research vessel, one contemplates the enduring spirit of a continent that might have reshaped Earth itself. Mu's modern cities, ecological mastery, and cultural achievements form a singular vision of possibility, a world where humans evolved alongside their environment rather than exploiting it. Imagining such a place invites reflection on the paths not taken, on the potential of curiosity, collaboration, and environmental intelligence. In the end, Mu is more than a hypothetical land. It is a mirror, challenging us to reconsider the history we know, the futures we imagine, and how humanity might live in harmony with Earth's oceans, skies, and landforms. Even as the waves reclaim forgotten shores, Mu endures in the imagination, a testament to what humanity might have achieved when curiosity, ingenuity, and nature intertwine. Its cities of coral and fire, its star-guided laws, and its thriving oceans whisper of possibilities lost to time yet alive in thought. In envisioning this hidden continent, we glimpse not just a world that could have been, but the limitless potential of human imagination when guided by wonder and respect for the earth. Let this vision linger like a tide upon the mind, and if it stirred your curiosity, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts.